Hey there. Welcome to the Literary Escape Podcast. I'm your host, Becky, and I'm glad you're here today. On the Literary Escape Podcast, we talk about books. We talk about escapes that we can have through our books. And I always have some great book recommendations for you. So, buckle up and let's see where we're going today. Enjoy the show. Today I've got a fun interview to share with you. I've met Aria Bliss a couple of times in the last year, and we've been to a couple of the same conferences. So it's been a lot of fun kind of getting to know her a little bit. And I was so excited when she said that she would join me on the podcast today. So I cannot wait to share with you all about her books and all about her writing and why you should check her out. If you are into steamy, emotionally charged romance with humor, drama, and big old feels, then you're definitely going to want to check her out. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Aria Bliss. So Aria, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm happy to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So you and I have met a couple of different times this year, and it's been really fun getting to know you. So I
too.
I appreciate you joining me today so I can learn even more.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's always fun to talk book stuff. So I'm always open to that.
I'm always down with that myself. So I know that writing is not your full-time job. So how did you get into writing?
Well, like so many people, I think it's one of those things that it's always been there even from as a young child. But I wrote a lot in my early, I guess, preteen and teenage years. It was kind of a way, it's my magic escapism sometimes from, the life and being a kid and all those things. And then as I got older and I focused more on my day job, like as a scientist, I still always read a lot. I've always been a very, very avid reader. And I think I finally got to a point because I started out writing science fiction and fantasy under a different pen name before I jumped over into romance. And the main reason why I started writing it, because all the books that I loved the most were young adult.
Okay.
And I was like, why can't we have books that have characters my age in them?
Indeed, yes.
And so that's what kind of re-sparked that love of writing in me was because I was like, well, if you can't find the book you want to read, then write it. And I'm like, okay,
that's exactly
fine.
Right.
So that's how I kind of started it. And then it just kind of led down this path, the journey to where I am now writing contemporary romances, Aria Bliss.
Okay. So your daytime job is a scientist, and did that creep into any of your books?
It has actually. It definitely played a huge part of like the science fiction fantasy that I wrote under a different pen name for sure. But even with the contemporary romance that I'm writing, I haven't written it yet, but I have a whole series kind of that I've been planning and outlining, and that I hopefully will start writing sometime next year, which is going to center around nerdy scientists that work at a university similar to me.
That's fun.
Hopefully not too science heavy so that it doesn't like bog down the average person's brain, because most people don't get as passionate about science as I do.
Okay, that sounds like fun. Yeah. So your books are sexy and fun with a healthy dose of real life.
Yes.
So how does the real life, what does that mean?
So I try to write characters that could be our everyday friends. They could be people that we could relate to and even like, either see ourselves as or see as our friends dealing with, real life issues and wounds and backgrounds and relationship struggles. And so it's just because it's important to me, because sometimes, even in the contemporary world, you can read something that's just like, it's highly entertaining and it's fun and it's like, but it's just so, it's like this would never happen. Right.
Yeah.
And while there's always little things like, well, that probably wouldn't really happen in real life, but it fits maybe the trope that I'm writing. But I try to make everything that I write be like something that's like we can relate to in real life. That's like, so yes, it's a form of escapism, but yet there's a level of reality to it that is like that these could be our friends.
Well, that always makes me kind of root for them a little more. And
Yes.
at the end of it, it always makes me a little sad to have to say goodbye to them. Yeah.
I know, right? I'm finishing up a series right now. I'm ready. I'm getting ready to start writing the very last book in the series, and part of me is like, I'm excited to get it done, but I'm also sad because I'm like,
I really
they'll
like
be
these
gone.
people.
I like these people. They're like my family.
So when you do a series, do like the characters from book one, are they in book two? Do we
Yes,
get to see them?
yes, they're all interconnected. So, which that's kind of like the new term in
Okay.
writing contemporary romance, like in a series, because like in romance, they don't like your books don't end in cliffhangers. Each book is like an individual standalone, typically,
Yeah.
even though they're connected. So they're all interconnected standalones.
Okay.
And that
Yeah.
seems to be the hot new topic of what everybody is using now to describe them, which is true. So you get to meet like all the characters, and then you get so like in book one you maybe meet all the characters, and then in the next book you'll see the story of one of the other ones that you met, and so on. And it's both fun and challenging to write that way, because it's just like carrying over all those characters through like a 4 or 5 book series without with like remembering, like, am I telling them enough for this one to be a standalone, or am I telling them too
Right.
much and they're gonna be like, why are
Yeah.
you telling me all of this?
Yeah. And it's
So
got to be a tricky balance between,
it
the people
is.
that have read 1, 2, and 3, they don't want to read all
Yeah,
of the same stuff in book 4. But
exactly.
if there's information that the new reader needs to know for this one, enough to make
Right.
them like want to go back and read the other
Correct. Without,
ones.
yes,
But
without being like, this is way too much info.
exactly.
Yeah.
So what was your first books that you wrote? Or
My very
you
first no,
I was gonna say you started in science fiction, right?
correct.
Okay, so and
Yeah.
were they the first ones that were published?
They were the first ones that were published, yes, was in the science fiction and fantasy, kind of this like dystopian type world that I created.
Those
And
are fun.
yeah, and they are. And so like I'm a plot driven writer. So you like either have character driven writers or plot driven writers.
Right.
And I'm a plot driven writer. And science fiction fantasy is heavily dominated by the plot, right?
Yeah.
So it made sense that that's where I started my writing journey. And one of the, I guess, criticisms that I got back, that was like my character development could have been better. They,
Okay.
sometimes some readers maybe struggled connecting with the characters more. And
Okay.
that's what led me. So I did like I'm a self-learner. And so I will, like, if I feel like I need to work on something, I will like deep dive into that subject matter. I'll
Okay.
spend a year, sometimes more, whatever it takes to like get it. So I did like a year-long character emotional journey in writing, and that led me to writing romance, which is how I started writing
Interesting.
romance as Aria Bliss, because romance stories are true character driven stories, right? And so when I started writing in that, so I started with more of a novella series. I didn't really know if I was going to enjoy it, because I love writing science fiction fantasy. I love making up worlds that
Yeah.
it's just super fun. It can be mind boggling, but it's super fun to do. And I wasn't sure if I was going to like writing romance, so I started on a smaller scale as a way to like improve my character development in my stories. And so my first series is actually a series of novellas. They're anywhere from like 25 to, I think the last one ended up being like 55,000 words. So they kind
Okay.
of grew from there.
Yeah,
Each one
totally.
gets a little bit longer, because I think I kept learning more and enjoying that writing process more, and like digging deeper into the emotional journey of characters. So each one got a little bit deeper and a little bit better.
Right.
And it was all centered around like office romances, because at the time I was working in like corporate America when I started writing that series for a consulting firm. And so my personal life was heavy into like just like office dynamics and dealing with big city issues and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what the first series really centered around, were couples who are like maneuvering through these office environments and falling in love. And
Was that the one that was called? It's called Office Quickies. Is that
it's called
one?
an after hours affair is what it's called.
Okay. Okay.
After
Hours affair. That was all.
Yeah.
That all took place in New York City, right?
Correct, in New York City. Yes.
Okay. And did you live in New York City?
I did not.
Okay.
So interestingly enough, I'm a country girl. I'm a small town girl. I always want to live in a small town. It's like, that is my preferred. I grew up in the middle of nowhere. I always want to live in the middle of nowhere, but I still love the city dynamics, and I've lived in big cities in the past. But like my first science fiction and fantasy series, the dystopian series, actually takes place in New York City. And I'm actually destroying New York City in that book series. And so it just kind of felt right to just
go
take
back
this
to
and
New
like go
York
back and
and
just like start
give it
there.
a little bit of love this time, maybe.
Exactly. So yeah.
Oh, that's fun. Okay. And have you been to New York before?
I have, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Never lived there. Haven't ever stayed there for long. Haven't, but it's just,
Enough to get the energy
it's,
of it, the
yeah,
vibe.
it's one of those cities that it's like I want to go there and spend. I like to immerse myself in communities and environments, and I tend to write about areas that I want to immerse myself in.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so, and that's one of
fun.
those areas that I want to go, and I want to just like for 2 or 3 weeks and just immerse myself into New York City life and
Yeah.
experience it on not just for a weekend or even for a week. So I just don't feel like that's
Right.
even possibly enough, right?
It doesn't seem like it would be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the latest series that you've been working on?
So interesting enough, this latest series actually took me back to New York City.
Oh, okay.
So my first series took place in New York City. My second series was a small town romance that took place in a fictional small town I made up in northern Montana.
Oh, fun.
And then so my current series, the one I'm currently writing the last book for, is called A Drunk Love Contemporary Romance Series, actually takes place in New York City as well. And so actually this series is actually ended up being a pseudo spinoff from a character in a bar I introduced in the first series. And
Oh,
so
fun.
so in I think it's in the fourth book in the first series. And actually, interesting enough, the fourth book in the first series is a spinoff for both of my next two series. It introduces a character that comes from Montana and then jumps over there, and then it also introduces a character in the bar called the Rock Room that is the focal point of the current series, A Drunk Love. And so it's a group of siblings that wealthy family. They're billionaires, but I don't really focus on that trope in the series. I don't even really promote the series as that, even though they're a very wealthy family. It's just, it's more fun to live in New York City when you have lots of money.
And I would imagine so. Yes, I would imagine so. Doing New York on a budget is challenging.
It's tough. Yeah, it's tough. And it's been interesting in bringing characters into that series who need to live on a budget.
Right. That's always a fun one. Yeah.
I mean, balancing those dynamics between
this one who knows how to spend it and this one
who's like, I'm on a budget. I can't do this.
Yeah. That's so funny. So tell me about the small town Montana one.
So the small town in Montana. So it's a fictional, like I said, I'm a small town girl, and I don't know. It's like when I decided to write that, it was like one of those things like I wanted to kind of get back to my roots, even though I didn't grow up in Montana. I grew up in Southern Ohio. But I wanted to take, and it was just, I wanted to write about more of that lifestyle, that living, like, living like ranches and farms and, and just like, because the struggles and the dynamics is very different in small town versus a big city. And then what the like I am, like, as a scientist, I'm an environmental scientist, so nature is a big part of my life and my passion. And so by writing in a small town community, we can focus more on the environment and nature and the surroundings. And I purposefully placed this small town near Glacier National Park, near the mountains, because the mountains are my favorite. I live in Florida, one of the flattest states in this nation, right? But I prefer mountains. I want to live in the mountains. I want to live where there's snow and there's topography, and so that's one of the reasons why I chose that area to write about. Even though I've been to parts of that region, I just love that. I love mountains. I love small towns. I love, the like festivals and the like little carnivals and things that you can
those are
focus on. It's
uniquely, I think, I mean, having never lived in a big city either, but I feel like that kind of stuff is kind of uniquely, the county fair and
exactly
things like, the 4th of July parade are a big deal. And
right. And it's just not, even though big cities may have those things, it's just very different. It's not the same. Because like growing up in Ohio, I grew up where like like Oktoberfest are a really big thing. And like if
Yeah.
you go to Oktoberfest in a big city, it's nothing like the Oktoberfest that the small villages will have. They're like night and day in
Oh, how
terms of the
funny.
dynamics and how they're structured and the vibe and the feel. And I just love that small town vibe, which is why I wanted to write a small town series as well.
That's fun. I was just out in Glacier the beginning of last month. So about a
Oh,
month ago, about 4
exciting.
weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's a beautiful area.
I'd never been to Glacier. I'd been to Montana before, but never to Glacier. And it is a beautiful area.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
The topography and it was, we had some really cool hikes and
I bet.
waterfalls are amazing. And we were walking on this one path, this one hike, and there's a deer like literally right off the path, which I'm assuming tells you how used to tourists they
They
are,
are, yeah.
because it didn't even
It's
look
like
at
you just
me.
become part of the scenery at that point.
Apparently, yeah. But it was, I mean, I could have reached out and touched it. I didn't, of course, but
Yeah.
it was
It's always
amazing.
interesting. Yeah, it's always
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah. Yeah,
pretty
for
funny.
sure. Yeah.
And little I think they were chipmunks, maybe. No, what were they? Marmosets, maybe,
Okay.
that were
Yeah.
completely unafraid of us and like trying
Yeah.
to dive into our purses and wherever they might
Yeah.
find a snack and like
Yep. It's like, so people get, that's why they get trained. People start feeding the critters, and it's like, this is why the critters
yeah,
become problematic, because you're not supposed to feed them.
exactly. I mean, being another Floridian, we know that with the alligators,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
not a good thing to do.
Yeah, because when
So
the
yeah,
alligators aren't scared of you, it's time to run.
that's a problem. Yeah. And that's a problem.
Yep.
So New York, Montana, do you have any other settings for your books?
Yes. So those are the only two settings that I have published works in, but I have
Okay.
future works. Like, so my next series, the series I'm going to start as soon as I finish the fifth book in A Drunk Love series, is actually going to take place in my hometown where I grew up in Southern Ohio.
Oh, fun.
So I'm going full immersion back into my roots. It's going to be, I think, an interesting and challenging series for me to write. Because it will probably be some of the more personal works that I've ever written.
Yeah.
Because I'm pulling in like my hometown dynamics. I'm not even going to change the setting. It's like I grew up in a small village called Beaver, Ohio, and it's going to take place in Beaver, Ohio.
Really? Wow.
So
Okay.
I'm not going to change. I'm going to change.
I was going to ask that. Yeah.
I'm going to change some things, like, businesses and things like that. I'm not going to use existing things, but all these cities and towns and villages and regional areas in the county, all of that is going to remain the same. I'm not going to change any of that in the setting, because I really want to. So it'll obviously still be small town. And so I grew up. There's 7 of us. I have 6 siblings, so there's 7 of us, and so and we have a very weird family dynamics, multiple dads, so it's just, it's one of those type of families. And so I'm going to do the same thing, but instead of, I'm going to make them all brothers. So it's going to be 7 brothers. And so each one of them
are going 7 brides for 7 brothers
kind of thing. Yeah. So it's good. So a lot of it is going to build off of, they're not going to exactly be me and my siblings, but I'm going to pull in, different struggles and the dynamics that each of us, like, we dealt with and grew up with, with our childhoods, and
blending families
blending that. Yeah,
always a challenge.
It's always a challenge. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that one, because there's just so much. I mean, it's just going to build on like so many things that I know, but I also think it's going to be one of the more challenging works that I've ever written, because it is going to be more personal. And so it's going to be the balance of, and how to change some of that, so that it's not like
balance between the real and the fictitious.
Exactly. But I'm looking forward to it, because it's just
fun.
A lot of fun. There's just gonna be a lot of fun small town topics and dynamics that I'm gonna play with and have fun with. That I'm just
that's good. Do you have the series already kind of plotted out?
I do, yeah. So I do. I'm a heavy plotter. I plot every single thing. I chapter
That's
by
a scientist
chapter.
in you, I think.
It is. Absolutely. I have my method. There's a method. Sometimes you'll be like, how do you guys know what to do? And it's like, I have a method. I know exactly what's going to happen from chapter to chapter, scene to scene, from beginning to end, before I even start writing. And I haven't done that to each detail for every single one of the books, but I have I've got my character sketches done for all the characters, including like secondary families and, grandmas and dads and
Okay.
friends, or like the dynamics, like the concepts I want to pull into it. Like, they're all going to be, race car drivers and mechanics, because that's the big thing. Tractor pulling, they're going to go mud running in the logging trails in Southern Ohio, because like all these things. I mean, they're going to have like play euchre and poker, and they're
Yeah.
going to be bake-off contests. There's like all these things that are like things from my home life that are all going to be incorporated in there. Like
Yeah.
all that is kind of planned out. There are going to be some rival family dynamics, and
Oh, that'll be
so
fun.
yeah, so and I know each of the hero and heroine and what their primary personalities are, and what their struggles are going to be, and what the overall concepts and dynamics of each story is going to be. And each one of them, they're going to be more emotional stories, I
Okay.
think. Each struggling with like some like emotional wound and trauma that they have
Okay.
to overcome.
Yeah.
And so, and I've planned all of that out. And so now it's just, as soon as
Nice.
I finish this series, I'll be hopping into the first book in that one, and then that'll be my
Then
next
you're
focal
running.
point. And I'm
Yeah.
running. Yep, ready to go.
So how long does it take you to draft a book, I guess?
So when I'm outlining, so it usually takes me about a week or two to get my outline to the point where I'm comfortable to actually start writing. And so, and a lot, but like I will be, even when I'm writing one book, I'm thinking about more than one book at the same
Yeah.
time.
No, I
And so
get
I'll be
that.
writing ideas down all the time. So I have like notes and stuff. I'm always writing down ideas. So it usually but once I'm ready to start on a book, okay, I'll sit down. Okay, here's all my notes on this book. It usually takes me about a week or two to get everything outlined. And then once I start writing, once that's done, I can usually write a completed draft in about a month and a half, depending if I have like my day job and life gets
Yeah.
really busy,
Yeah.
but usually about a month. And then
Nice.
first draft is done. So I'm a pretty
That's
fast
awesome.
writer once I know everything that's going to happen.
Okay. That certainly seems like it would make it a lot easier. I'm
Yeah.
always impressed by the pantsers who don't have any idea where it's going, and the characters kind of make it up as they go.
I know.
I was like, wow, that is so cool.
I have the utmost respect for pantsers. I have no clue how
Yeah.
they do it, because I could not. But I know, and I talking to my friends who are pantsers, and they're like, "Oh, I'm struggling with writer's block." And so, like, I don't struggle with writer's block. I struggle with plotter's block. Like, that's what holds me up, is if I'm
Okay.
struggling with figuring out plot points, because I can't get myself to write, even if I have, like, say, the first 2/3 of the story like plotted out and outlined. I cannot start writing even chapter one
Until
till
you know
everything's
where
plotted.
it's
My
going.
brain just
Yeah.
says no, because what if something happens in that last quarter of the book that like, or something changes, and I'm like, okay, but then I got to change this at
Now
the
I gotta go
beginning,
change
and I've
this.
already
Yeah.
written it. I don't like to rewrite things. I'm
Yeah.
very, so yeah, so I get plotter's block, not writer's block.
Okay. That's interesting. I love that. Huh. I love how everybody does it differently.
Yeah, at
And
the end of the day, we all write books that make sense, and
exactly.
they're great, and
You all get to the
we
same
all
finish line.
we
And
do. It's just we get there differently. Yeah.
I love that. I think that's such a cool thing. And I mean, it seems like if anybody wants to be a writer, they should try it, because there's so many
Yeah.
ways to do it.
Yeah,
And
and there are so many, really the trick with writing a novel, and if you when you decide to write, is finding which techniques and approaches work best for you, because there are so many different books out there, like craft books to read and look at, and it's just, the trick is really just finding what works for you, and
yeah,
then that's what
and
you
that
stick
just
with.
takes playing with it and
Yeah,
figuring
and
out.
like because I spent, like, before and it's like when I first decided to write a novel in 2014. I
Okay.
spent a full year reading as many craft books as I could get my hands on
Yeah.
before I even started writing my first. I was like halfway into 2015 before I started writing my first book. And then I started
Okay.
writing that book, and I get to like the midpoint, and I'm like, this isn't right. Something's not right. And it's like, and so I stopped writing and I went back to the craft books and started digging more into like structure and story structure.
Okay.
I'm really big on story structure. Like that's probably I will nerd out on story structure if you let me. Um, and so then I started like, okay, now I got to start over because I didn't quite get this structure part right.
Right.
And then I started over, but I started writing an entirely different novel
Oh.
instead of the one I started with, because it's like once you start writing something, sometimes it's hard to just like
Yeah.
start over or rewrite. And then I didn't really know what I was doing. And so it's just like, it's a mess. And so
I've heard
yeah.
it like authors who are traditionally published where, they'll send the book to the editor and they want all these rewrites and make it almost a completely different story. And
Mhm.
like you were just saying, that seems like that would be so hard
It
when
is.
this is the
Yeah.
story you wanted to write and to have to
Now you got
kind
to
of
change
turn
the
it
whole
upside
thing.
down.
Yep.
Yeah.
And because they're very personal. I mean, it's hard to, I mean, I don't, at least for me, it's impossible to write any story without it being personal,
Right.
because
And
there's
to
a part
stay
of me.
unattached to it
Yeah. They become your
feels like it
children.
would come across.
Yeah, they're like your children. Like they're
Yeah.
just, even if there's not a part, like there's a part of me in every single story I've ever written. And so they're very personal. And so it's very hard when somebody tells you, no, you need to change that. It's like, but no.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what are you reading right now?
What am I reading? Right. I'm actually reading some. Normally I read books that are similar to what I'm trying to write. But right now I'm reading kind of say romantic suspense
Ooh, I
with a
love those.
little layer of, see, they're not usually my favorite. I like the more funny. I like books that make me cry, and I like books that make me laugh. I don't
Okay.
typically like books that make me tense up.
Okay. That's okay. That's so funny.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
books that make me cry, I didn't realize how much I love books that made me laugh, and so I started reading rom-coms. But I probably love books that
There's
make me
some
cry
really
the
good ones.
most.
Yeah.
But this one is more of a I'm trying to remember the name of it right now. It's called Pen Pal, I think.
Huh.
I it's I didn't and it has a little layer um of supernatural to it, which is
Ooh,
like totally did not see that coming. And so it's like nothing like
that's
what
so
I'm writing.
curious.
Yeah.
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 Wow.
Yeah. And so it's just like the book is absolutely nothing like anything I have ever written or ever anticipate writing.
That's so funny. Oh, okay. See, yeah, the whole romantic suspense thing or any kind of suspense
Yeah.
seems like it would be so hard because you really have to plot out, like leaving
Yeah.
those red herrings and the clues and
Yeah. And like, and then
all
as you're
that
reading
stuff.
them, because and when you're reading, it's like things happen and you're just like, this makes no sense. And then part of it, because it's not supposed to make sense yet, right? You're
Right.
supposed to wait for it and wait for it. And it just,
And
those
if they're
books,
good, they build up
they
and
build up and they build up. And this one, I did not see the whole like supernatural aspect coming. It was one of those things that I'm
that's
like,
so
because I
interesting.
was like reading, I'm like, what are they doing? I do not understand where this book is going, because I was
Huh.
not expecting the supernatural component to
Usually that they at least give you a warning of something like that, or at least
and you
some
know, and
clues of that at the beginning so you know where it's going. But
right,
that's
and there may
interesting.
have been in the blurb. I didn't pick up on it, and there may have
Okay.
been in like the categories it's in, and I guess but yeah. So it's just kind of, but it's
Okay.
interesting because it's not
Okay.
normally what I would read, but it's
Yeah,
not,
and you
and
probably wouldn't have picked it up if you had known,
yeah, I'm
maybe.
enjoying it though. But
Yeah.
it's just yeah, it's a different book, especially coming off of finishing a rom-com series. I just finished reading.
That's funny. I love it. Yeah, they're definitely different than
They're
rom-coms, aren't
night
they?
and day,
Wow.
yo.
That's so funny. So, book number 5 of the Drunk Club series.
Hmm.
When do you anticipate that one will be out?
That one will release November 22nd.
Fantastic. And what's
So
the name of it?
that one is Make Me Go.
Make Me Go. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
where do you like to connect with readers at?
I the three main places I connect are either in my newsletter. That's probably the number one place that I send. I'm religious with my newsletter, and I've in building
Nice.
my newsletter. Um, and then probably my Facebook group, and then TikTok.
Okay.
I really am, TikTok is probably where, yeah, those three locations. And I'd probably take my newsletter and TikTok even before Facebook. For some
Okay.
reason, like Facebook is just one of those places that I have a love-hate relationship with Facebook.
I understand that. Yeah. I totally understand
But
that.
I
Well,
love, I did not anticipate my enjoyment of TikTok as much as I do, but I thoroughly enjoy that platform. It's like, it's impossible for me not to go on there and not get lost in, the humor, the laughter, the drama,
it is so easy to waste a good hour scrolling, man.
I find more books that I want to read on TikTok. I mean, it truly is like, when you get into the book talk community, I try to explain this to some of my other author friends who are resistant to it. I was like, it really is a great place to find new books to read too, not just to like find readers for my own books, but also to find books to read.
That's
and
fun.
Sometimes they're great books and sometimes they're not, but that's true no matter where you get recommendations from. But it's just
Well, I will make sure to put some links in the show notes to all three of those places: your email, your Facebook group, and your TikTok account. And the books that we talked about, the Drunk Love series, the After Hours series, the Hearts of Watercress Falls, the Montana one. I will link to those.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for joining me today. Totally enjoyed this. It was a lot
thanks
of fun
for having me.
with you.
Thanks for joining me today on the Literary Escapes podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode and maybe would like some more Literary Escape book recommendations, then come check out the Literary Escape Society. We're a community of travelers who love books, or maybe book lovers who love to travel. Either way, if you need an escape, a literary escape, come join us as we read our way around the world together, one book at a time. Check out the show notes to learn more about the Literary Escape Society. And we'll see you next time on the next episode.